Parasite Eve seemingly came out of nowhere, delivering a different take on the survival horror genre, mixing it with classic JRPG elements to create a truly unique experience that would go on to become a cult classic. I mean, everyone certainly remembers the first time seeing this scene. It made a bold statement about what to expect from Square's first horror title, and certainly ramped up the absurdities as you progressed deep into the game. My name is Nick, this is Deep Dives, and welcome to the world of Parasite Eve. For anyone new, Deep Dives is a series where I take an extended look right inside the guts of various video games, talking about facts, figures, some of the more obscure stuff behind the scenes, and anything I think might be interesting. Parasite Eve is a game I've wanted to cover for a while. I remember back in the day, this wasn't actually released in the UK, but I managed to play it on a friend's chipped PS1, so as you can imagine, I felt like I'd played something that not many other people had at the time in the UK. Before we get cracking, I'd like to thank everyone for their continued support of the channel. If you haven't done already, please drop a sub on the channel as it helps me out massively. Because I like numbers, I can see that a whopping 88.6% of you good people that watch my content haven't yet subscribed, so if you're feeling kind, please do so. Oh, and also like this video. With that in mind, let's get into it and talk about Parasite Eve. Ideas for Parasite Eve go all the way back to 1994, where the legendary Hironobu Sakaguchi was keen on the idea of making a horror game set in New York where you play as a detective. This core idea was being thrown around during the early concept of Final Fantasy VII, but due to the troubled development of Chrono Trigger, all the staff were reassigned to Chrono Trigger to push it over the finishing line. A quote from a Polygon interview will elaborate on this a little, talking about Final Fantasy VII. At that early point, we were all still going back and forth about what the story should be. Nothing had been clearly decided on yet. In the first plot treatment that Sakaguchi-san wrote, it took place in New York. There was an organisation there that was trying to destroy the Maka reactors, and a character named Detective Joe was investigating them. There were other characters involved too. One of the members of this organisation trying to destroy the reactor was the prototype character for eventual Final Fantasy VII main character, Cloud. By the time they came back to Final Fantasy VII, 3D games were becoming a thing, and, well, it turned out to be one damn fine game. But that core idea was always floating around Sakaguchi's brain, and in 1995 a novel was released called Parasite Eve. I'll go into this in more detail in an upcoming segment, but the novel essentially told the story of intelligent lifeform Eve, who had been waiting throughout human history for the right conditions when mitochondrial life could achieve its true potential and take over from eukaryotic lifeforms by causing a child to be born that can control its own genetic code. With the explosive success of Resident Evil in 1996, Sakaguchi and co. wanted to get a piece of that horror action and set about looking for inspiration for their own game to leave their mark on the horror world. It was at this point they got wind of the Parasite Eve book that released a year prior. They saw this intricate story and decided to create a new game based off this book, which was an odd move for Square at the time, considering they were champions of creating new and exciting IPs. No actual reasoning was ever given as to why they chose this book to base their new IP on, but here we are. It was to be a sequel to the novel set in Tokyo, but that detective idea just couldn't remove itself from Sakaguchi's head, and after 6 months of development, changed the setting to New York, still acting as a sequel. With Final Fantasy VII development in full swing, its game engine was modified and used to create the engine for Parasite Eve. Most of Parasite Eve's production took place in the good old US of A, and the staff was composed of both Japanese and Americans, while being overseen by Hironobu Sakaguchi and directed by Takashi Takita. In an interview with cttheory.net, the author of the book, Hideaki Senna, described how he had no idea about the plot of Parasite Eve until the game was finished, due to the result of it being a collaboration between Squaresoft and Senna's publisher. The name of the character, Maya Brea, was created by Sakaguchi and designed by the renowned Tetsuya Nomura. In the design brief, Sakaguchi wanted a strong female lead character, much like Lara Croft at the time. In an interview with Nomura, it was stated that Aya should have strength and fragility, as well as sexiness or seductiveness. Someone who is very easy on the eyes, but also able to get the job done. In the same interview over at Famitsu from 2010, Nomura would elaborate a little on how Sakaguchi was not happy with the initial sketches of Aya, wanting a design closer to that of Aerith from Final Fantasy VII. Nomura stated, "The character design for I was initially handled by another staff member, but the finished illustration was different from Sakaguchi-san's image, so I was approached. The request at the time was to make the hair long on the sides like Aerith from Final Fantasy VII, however, at the time there was also talk of another character design, and there was a request for a shortcut. I drew it thinking it was that talk, but I heard later that Sakaguchi-san actually wanted Aya in a ponytail. I got two characters from different projects mixed up, and as a result, Aya's hairstyle was short with the sides grown out. It seems that he liked it, so it was adopted as it was. Ha ha ha." During the Tokyo Game Show in September 1997, a fully CG trailer was released for Parasite Eve, getting people rather excited. Then just 6 months later, the game would release on the 29th of March 1998 in Japan. Then, another 6 months later on the 10th of September 1998, after a slew of live-action TV ads, it would be released in North America for the PlayStation as well. An interesting thing to note here is that Parasite Eve was Squaresoft's first game to be rated mature. It would be remiss of me not to talk about the soundtrack, which was brought to life by the legendary Yoko Shimomura, who is famously known for her work on the Kingdom Hearts series, among other things. Before this, Shimomura was at Capcom working on games such as Street Fighter II and Final Fight, before leaving Capcom to go work for Square in 1993. After a couple of smaller jobs, Shimomura would eventually get the job on Parasite Eve, where she showcased a masterclass in blending opera and electronica together to really complement the voiceless video game, helping convey the gravitas of every scene or fight. In an interview on RocketBaby.net, Shimomura stated that she tried to write music that was inorganic, something unique to Square. However, it was a project loaded with hardships. Ha ha ha. It was really tough. I think you'll agree, however, that in the end, the result was perfect. As much as I like Parasite Eve, the actual controls haven't aged particularly well. Aya walks around at a snail pace unless you hold the run button, and the directional inputs are a little clunky. Things change up once you get into combat, and that's where Parasite Eve's strengths lie. Combat has Aya running around at a regular speed while trying to avoid various attacks from monsters in real time. Once your AT bar fills, you can unleash your attacks. You still have to select from a menu what attack you are doing, but there was also the element of moving into the right positions and making sure you were dodging attacks until then. It felt really cool. Obviously, as games have progressed, this system has been used in other games, but back then I'd never seen this before. While the game's style was described by Takashi Takita as a cinematic RPG, it didn't stop some reviews describing it as a hybrid of Final Fantasy VII and Resident Evil, which I guess is sort of true, although I do think Parasite Eve does enough to actually stand out as its own separate thing. Right, it's time for a brief rundown of the plot. You take on the role of Maya Brea, who, on Christmas Eve 1997, is attending an opera at Carnegie Hall with a date. Things seem normal, but during the performance, people around Aya start to spontaneously combust due to the awakening of an entity called Eve in the lead performer Melissa. All the while, Aya remains mysteriously unaffected by Eve's powers. After a fruitless scuffle, Aya soon discovers that she also possesses powers and sets about to take down Eve while meeting new people, fighting a shitload of monsters, and discovering horrific secrets about hers and Eve's intertwined past. This, of course, is just a fleeting look at the plot. More will be explained as we explore the characters' respective journeys through Parasite Eve. For now, let's take a quick look at the source material and a closer look at Mitochondria. As I mentioned earlier, back in 1995, author Hideaki Senna had his first novel published, Parasite Eve. According to an interview with CT Theory, he'd been writing since he was in elementary school, around the age of 14 or 15. Sometime after school, Senna would go on to become a pharmacology PhD student at Tohoku University in the northern Japanese city of Sendai. In his own words, he engaged in research work about the fatty acid metabolism in rat liver mitochondria, so mitochondria was of course his primary interest. At that time, a TV program about mitochondrial symbiosis was on the air. Also, there was a best-selling popular science book, which was non-fiction, about mitochondrial Eve and the selfish gene, so a concept of mitochondrial Eve was somehow familiar in Japan. I'll go into mitochondria in more detail in the next segment, but with his inspiration locked in, Senna went on to write his prize-winning book, Parasite Eve, which told the story of how a colony of mitochondria assembled in a human host, Kiyomi, the young wife of a genetic scientist who was rendered brain dead in a car accident under the influence of Eve. Eve spends most of her time manipulating people to do her bidding, such as getting Kiyomi's husband, Toshiaki Nagashima, to transplant one of Kiyomi's kidneys into the body of a young girl called Mariko and Zai as part of an organ donation. Eve wants to do this in order to prepare Mariko to be a suitable host for giving birth to mitochondrial life, as her immune system would otherwise rebel. Eve then influences Toshiaki to keep Kiyomi alive by cultivating tissue from her liver. Really, she wants to use the cultivated cells to form an independent body she can use to get about. Once she has enough, she possesses Toshiaki's assistant, Asakura, to continue work on the cultures before revealing her true presence during a conference. Eve leaves Asakura's body and flees back to the lab with Toshiaki in tow, only to sexually assault him when he arrives in the form of his dead wife. She does this to take his sperm and implant it into an egg of her own making, before moving to the hospital to implant the egg into the womb of Mariko. The egg quickly develops into a child and is born immediately. Science is crazy. Eve predicts that her child will be able to consciously change its genetic code, meaning it can adapt at will to become the perfect life form, which will eventually replace humanity. There is just one snag. Toshiaki's sperm carries a separate line of male mitochondria that resists the change by fighting for control of the child's body, causing it to switch between male and female forms. As the child is dying, it begins to throw out psychokinetic power, which threatens to kill a lot of people. Toshiaki sacrifices himself, merging his body with the child's to control the burst of energy. The book was very well received, becoming the first winner of the Japan Horror Novel Award. After 10 whole years, the book would be translated into English by Tyron Grillo for Vertical Ink. The fun didn't stop there, however. In 1997, while development of the Parasite Eve game was in full swing, Kadokawa Shoten, the publisher of the book, decided to use its film production side of its business to develop a film version of Parasite Eve, being as they own the rights to the name. Kadokawa hadn't made a film in 3 years at this point, following a major drug scandal involving then producer and filmmaker Haruki Kadokawa. Kadokawa Shoten hired an, at the time, all-star team to get the ball rolling. They hired Masayuki Ochiai to direct, Ryoichi Kimizuka to do the screenplay, and Ryona Hazuki to play Kiyomi, to name a few. A lot of pressure came from the producers to turn the film into somewhat of a love story, which director Masayuki was not happy with. The film took just 8 weeks to film and ended up being an interesting take on the novel, which received mixed reviews. The story of the film follows mostly the same beats, except there is a heavier emphasis on the themes of love. There's no birth of a weird baby, and Toshiaki kills Eve by giving her a nice fiery hug. Aww. Despite the story not being as strong as the book, and a tad less scientifically technical, it's still an interesting watch, and if you are looking for more insight into the past of Parasite Eve, and happen to not like reading books, the film is a good place to start. Right, time to get sciencey now and talk about actual, real mitochondria. Christ, why have I decided to break my brain like this? Okay, so strap yourself in folks, because I'm about to give you a science lesson, just in a very bad way. So before I explain mitochondria, I'm firstly going to brief over cells. Every living thing is made of cells. Us good old humans, for instance, are made up of many different types of cells. Bone cells, nerve cells, stem cells, white blood cells, red blood cells, etc. The human body contains roughly around 10 trillion cells, which is a massive amount. Each cell is very important and has a very specific role, such as your red blood cells, which carry blood around the body, muscle cells, which, you've guessed it, help with movement and support, and nerve cells, which send messages around the body. Each cell comes in different shapes and sizes, but all generally have the same internal makeup. The nucleus, aka the headquarters of the cell, contains the majority of the cell's DNA and sends out messages to the cell to grow, divide, or die. Each cell has a plasma membrane which surrounds the cell and keeps it separate from its neighbour and prevents water-based substances from entering the cell. You have the cytoskeleton, which helps the cell keep its shape, despite being a little flexible. Now, these are just a few of the internal organs, or organelles as they are officially called, of a cell. But the one we are really interested in today is the mitochondria. The mitochondria uses aerobic respiration to generate adenosine triphosphate, which is used throughout the cell as a source of chemical energy. Yes, I borrowed that description from Wikipedia. In its simplest form, and from my limited understanding, adenosine triphosphate is fuel, which is pumped around the cell by mitochondria. The mitochondria was discovered by one Albert von Kolliker, a professor in psychology, all the way back in 1857. Why does any of this matter, and what does that mean on the surface? Well, put even simpler, when we eat food, that gets broken down and digested. The cells in our body use that digested food to create adenosine triphosphate, or ATP for short, which is in turn the superfuel that we use to do things. It's better described in an interview with Hideaki Senna as complex organelles that exist within the cells and provide energy for respiration and metabolism. In this same interview, it explains that Parasite Eve takes as its starting point the 1987 announcement by a team of American molecular biologists that they had discovered the ancestral origins of Homo sapiens. Working on the assumption that the DNA of mitochondria have been passed down more or less intact through the maternal lineage since the beginning of humankind, the team collected mitochondrial DNA from 136 women of diverse geographic and racial origins. Running their data through a computer, the biologists then matched their findings to a single ancestral mitochondrial DNA molecule believed to be from an African woman just under 200,000 years old. Senna continues, what if he speculated the very mitochondria of African Eve passed down through countless generations as organelles subsumed within human cellular structure suddenly decided to assert their biological right to autonomy. If that were to occur, the common mitochondrial DNA that bound together the human race could be, to put it mildly, a nasty liability. It would be as if a dormant, united army within our collective selves suddenly awoke and declared it was Independence Day. From the science to this very idea inside Senna's head spawned the wonderfully ludicrous idea that is Parasite Eve, an army of tiny microscopic organisms that have united to take over the world. Lovely. I suppose now is a good time to talk about Mitochondria Eve and her ultimate goal. Mitochondria Eve is the big bad of Parasite Eve. Of course, she is not the first, as this game is a sequel to the book. In that sense, there are multiple Eves who are different women who have been taken over by the consciousness of the mitochondria in their cells. This game's Eve came to life inside the kidney of Maya Brea, sister to the protagonist Maya Brea. More on Maya and Aya in a bit, but after a terrible car accident, Maya's cornea was donated to her sister Aya, while her kidney was donated to Melissa Pierce. Melissa was only 12 years old when she suffered from kidney failure, and as cruel fate would have, Maya Brea was in the wrong place at the right time. After 6 months of being hospitalised, Melissa was released and the naughty colony of mitochondria lay dormant in her kidney for 20 years. Sometime after the transplant, Melissa would become very ill. The doctors believed it was her immune system rejecting the organ, so they decided to put her on a higher dose of immunosuppressant drugs. Naturally, Melissa blamed the drugs for her illness, which she was partially right. It was actually the sentient mitochondria that caused her illness, and the immunosuppressants were weakening her immune system, which, in turn, allowed the sentient mitochondria to gain greater control over Melissa. It's noted in-game that on several occasions, Melissa visited the American Museum of Natural History. It's not explicitly mentioned in-game, but considering the role Klamp had in creating the sperm Eve needed, it's highly likely that Melissa went to the museum in order to meet with Hans, possibly under Eve's control. This is of course a theory that's never been proven, but very likely considering the circumstances. In 1997, Melissa was hell-bent on performing in the lead role in an opera at Carnegie Hall. Unfortunately, she was double cast with another talented actress called Suzanne. The stress of the situation caused Melissa to overdose on her immunosuppressants, and shortly after, Suzanne mysteriously died in an apartment fire. Of course, Melissa got the lead role after that, but due to the guilt she felt and the pressure, she decided to take more drugs. She mentioned this to no one, not even her doctors, for fear of losing her leading role she had longed for. On that fateful night in 1997, Melissa performed on stage at Carnegie Hall as the witch Eva. With the immunosuppressants coursing through her body, the final nail in the coffin would be when Melissa and Aya locked eyes. Both the mitochondria in Melissa's body and Aya's body responded to each other's presence, because they came from the same place. This caused Melissa's mutated mitochondria to take over and burn down the house, literally with her performance. At this point, Eve's mitochondria communicated with the audience's mitochondria and told it to produce an excessive amount of adenosine triphosphate, which we spoke about in the previous segment. This excessive amount of ATP is enough to make everyone spontaneously combust. See? Science! After Eve runs off to play a piano, Aya finally catches up to Eve again, who finally kills off Melissa and transforms into Mitochondria Eve. Mitochondria Eve has a bunch of powers. Like I mentioned previously, she can increase the ATP in human cells to cause spontaneous combustion, mutate lesser organisms into monsters, shoot lasers from her hands, and can have some form of influence over people as well. After a short fight, Eve disappears and spends most of the game ramping up the carnage, including an evolution of her powers which sees her turn an entire audience of people into slime? There's no proper explanation for this, but at this point we can assume that she has total control over the cells in the human body. So, changing it into slime is a small feat for her growing power. What she uses this slime for is another thing. It can seemingly reanimate old dinosaur bones and cause it to attack whatever Eve deems fit, or she can turn it into a literal human shield to protect herself. On day 4, Eve encounters Aya on the roof and briefly tells her of the incident that happened in Japan, referencing the events of the book and the prequel to this game, saying that her sister made a mistake. She was visiting the hospital on that day, so Klamp could artificially inseminate her with the special sperm Klamp created. This particular brand of sperm had its male mitochondria DNA removed, leaving only the nucleus, meaning that the mishap we saw happen in the book wouldn't happen this time. The crew do not find out till day 5 that Eve is now pregnant. Damn, that was quick. Where she has moved into a part of the museum where the ultimate being gestates inside her, before being rescued by her own goop and carried away to the Statue of Liberty for reasons. I'll go through the final encounter towards the end of the video, but for now we will quickly go over Eve's motives, which really are quite simple. Eve wants to break free of the control that the host body has over her, escaping and eradicating all of human life in favour of the mitochondria that lives within, which will go on to produce a superior being that is capable of changing its own DNA at will. A quote from the game dives a little deeper into this. All organisms have something called a territory. This territory is guarded from natural enemies, but until now humans had no such natural enemy. That is what has allowed them to prosper to this point. You beings must think of your prosperity as history, but you're wrong. We mitochondria have lived within the human being and have allowed you to prosper. Ha ha ha! We mitochondria have made you create the perfect environment for us. Humans have come to rely on civilization and have lost touch with innate physical abilities. Can't you see that it's the perfect scenario? Humph. You humans just serve as transportation vehicles for us. Vehicles to transport us to a time the mitochondria would become free again. Ha ha ha. But you see, the vehicle is no longer needed anymore. From now on, the mitochondria will become human beings and will rule this earth. In that sense, a potential Eve resides in all women, where the consciousness of the mitochondria in their cells has coalesced into a singular intelligent being. Each Eve takes its name from the theorized mitochondrial Eve, the maternal, most recent common ancestor of all living humans. She is defined as the most recent woman from whom all living humans descend in an unbroken line purely through their mothers and through the mothers of those mothers back until all lines converge on one woman. It is also said that this particular woman possibly hailed from what is now known as East Africa. Hideaki Senna noted in the CT Theory interview that, and I quote, "The monster in my book Parasite Eve is not identical to the genetic meaning of mitochondrial Eve. She is a monster made from hepatocytes of a modern human, Kiyomi, a wife of a main character." So, there is a little trick of description in my book. She is just borrowing an image of mitochondrial Eve. Okay, we'll move on from Eve for now, before my head explodes, and briefly talk about those mitochondrial creatures that Eve makes throughout the game. Normally in these videos, I like to dedicate a section to creatures or enemies in games, especially if they have some hidden meaning behind them or some background that needs explaining. Parasite Eve is a little different though. The creatures in game are not really anything special and don't have any significant meaning behind them, They are mostly just animals that Eve has mutated with her powers. In-game, they are referred to as neo-mitochondrial creatures, whose own mitochondria is now producing extreme amounts of ATP and in turn causes drastic changes in the creature's nuclei. These NMCs are of course driven by their most basic needs and as a result attack anything and everyone in their vicinity, even their own kind, if no normal unaffected people are present. Thankfully for Aya, these serve as a good source of XP, so yay video games. There is a literal ton of different types of enemy in-game, so I won't run through them all in detail as there really is no need, but I will list them here. You have armadillos. They roll around and are a general pain in the ass. Bacterium. Even bacteria can mutate into weird spitting monsters apparently. Bats. Not very powerful, but they can silence Aya for a brief time, stopping her from using abilities. Bears. If you see these, my prayers are with you. Cats. Homing projectile wankers. Chameleons. Annoying jumping dickheads. Crows. Fairly easy to deal with and drop junk. Dogman. These guys can be dangerous if left unchecked, halving Aya's energy with its energy-based attack. Flyman. These flying arseholes can produce acidic toxins that can be a pain to avoid. Frogs. Slow movement, quick tongues. Mixed Man. Now we are talking. From the looks of it, this creature is formed from multiple bodies being fused together. Eve is a sadist. Moles. Also, massive pains in the ass. Stop hiding! Monkeys. Monkeys with boomerangs for arms is something I never thought I'd see in a video game. But here we are. Parrots. Weak-ass creatures met near the start of the game. Pterodactyls. Ancient dinosaur bones revived by goop into a dangerous threat. Rats. The first NMC Aya encounters, fairly weak, but has a flaming tail, so that's cool. Ratman. An evolved version of the rat. Spiders. These can fuck off. Scorpion. Slow but very powerful. Snakes. Snakes that shoot lightning are as scary as they sound. Troodon. Another revived dinosaur. Dangerous is describing this one lightly. Then you have the bosses of the game. Alligator. The first one. Giant worm. There are 4 of these and as you kill each one, the rest get stronger. A bit like the Highlander. Kerberos. Used to be a lovely dog called Shiva, but then that damn Eve came along. Spider-Woman. Not the one from Marvel Comics. Crab. A giant bloody crab. Powerful and dangerous. Centipede. It's a centipede. What more do you want? Triceratops. Another goop-powered dino serving as a starter before the T-Rex. I mean, what's scarier than a goop-powered T-Rex? It's probably one of the hardest bosses in the game. Right, that's it for the quick rundown of enemies. As I mentioned earlier, there really isn't much to them as they are just mutated versions of regular creatures, and the dinosaurs are all revived by Eve's orange mush. They all have some decent designs though, and I have to praise the developers for making them so rad. Right, now it's time to talk a bit about the protagonist and her sister, Aya and Maya Brea. I tend to talk about the protagonist towards the end of my videos, normally, but it made sense to talk about Aya and her twin sister Maya right here. Aya and Maya's mother was Maya Brea, and their father was an unnamed journalist. They were both born in Boston, Massachusetts on the 20th of November 1972. Aya was born with an eye defect in her right cornea. Firstly, it's heavily theorised and given the evidence is extremely plausible that their mother, Mariko, is actually Mariko and Zai from the prequel book. Nothing has ever been confirmed and it could literally just be a homage to the book, but it does fit. although a line spoken in-game by Kunihiko Maeda tells the incident in Japan with the previous Eve was several years ago, which wouldn't marry up time-wise. With nothing confirmed in concrete, this is left down to player interpretation. You don't find this out till Parasite Eve 2, but both Aya and Maya are half Japanese, meaning it's entirely possible that the unnamed father is an American and hence why they were born in Boston. Once again, this is all speculation, but it does fit. This would also lend weight to the fact that Mitochondria Eve's gene is strong in both the siblings, because they were passed on by the mother of the original ultimate being, which died at the end of the book. When they were just 5, 2 days before Christmas in 1977, a car crash would change Aya's life forever. Aya, Maya and her mother Mariko were taken to hospital, but only one returned home, with Maya and Mariko passing away from their injuries. While they were in hospital, as seen in the flashbacks, they were visited by Hans Klamp, but to what end? Who knows? Given that on the same day, Melissa Pierce was hospitalised for kidney failure, it's probable that it was Hans that performed the operation to transplant the kidney from Maya to Melissa, and also the one to preserve Maya's cornea to correct Aya's defect in the future. After this, a statement made by Aya in-game indicates that she was raised by her father alone and was very grateful to him, although there is a slight contradiction in the official Brady Games strategy guide that mentions Aya was placed in foster homes. It could be that he raised her for a while and then passed away, but nothing has been confirmed. Roughly 2 years later, Maya's cornea was transplanted into Aya, with the details of the surgery being sparse. Either way, the mitochondria present in both Melissa's new kidney and Aya's new cornea changed both individuals' genetic structure over time, with both evolutions going in different directions. As Aya grew older, she would go on to study criminology at the University of Virginia, before moving to New York City to become a police officer, eventually becoming a detective just after 3 years. The game starts 6 months after Aya joins the 17th Precinct, where, as explained earlier, Mitochondria Eve awakens in Melissa Pierce and puts on a sterling performance. Aya, with her evolved mitochondria flowing through her body, is unaffected by the flames, and shortly after confronting Eve, the mitochondria in Aya's body begins to activate, giving her the power of healing. And this is just the beginning. The more Aya uses her abilities, the more powerful she becomes, unlocking all sorts of mitochondrial powers as the game progresses. Aya's mitochondria is also supplying large amounts of energy to the nuclei within her cells, meaning her nuclei is actively fighting off Eve's mitochondrial control. There's not much else to fill in here, as Aya spends the rest of the game learning the truth about her past and her mitochondria, as well as taking on Eve in a fight to the death, and then some. All of this though will be covered in the endgame. We only see a portion of Aya's personality in the first Parasite Eve, with other developments which we will save for a future video. One thing for sure here is that Aya is definitely altruistic by nature, and she will always try to do the right thing no matter the cost, no matter the person. She even tries to save and subsequently comfort a dying Hans Klamp, despite all he had done to her. Other than that, Aya is a consummate professional and an all-round hero, throwing herself into danger because it's the right thing to do. Next, we're going to take a look at Daniel Dollis, a veteran detective, partner and good friend to Aya. Daniel has a son called Ben, who he now has sole custody of after he and his ex-wife Lorraine split up. Lorraine divorced Daniel 1 year prior to the game's beginning due to him being a workaholic, putting his job above his own family. And Daniel is very committed to his job, having worked in the force for over 20 years. Once upon a time, he was partnered with his current boss, Chief of Homicide Douglas Baker, until Doug decided he preferred a desk job and Daniel wanted to stay in the field. Damn pencil pushers. As written in the official manual for the game, Daniel is like a father figure to Aya, so much so they are referred to as the father and daughter team. Aww. Daniel spends the whole game supporting Aya, with his motivation shifting once Eve does a very bad thing to his ex-wife and a whole bunch of other people, turning them into jello. It's this act that ignites a fire in Daniel to get the job done, whatever the cost, even if it means sacrificing his own life to get the special mitochondria laced bullets to Aya. I do have to question his intentions here slightly, as throwing himself into a grisly death would have left Ben without any parents, but I suppose it was the 90s and things were meant to be very dramatic. Plus, the shot looked kind of cool. Daniel does display a lot of love for his son though, and even his ex-wife. He does also have an aggressive side, however, as seen multiple times throughout the game, punching reporters, grabbing folk, and threatening folk. The man is a menace, and I'm shocked he still has a job in the police. Need to remember, it's the 90s, it's the 90s. His son Ben also has a minor appearance in-game, being traumatised by a mutated dog that he met in the police station. Once again, I'll talk about the character's fates later, but as far as characters go, Daniel is a fun support for Aya, with his way over the top reaction to things and his inability to keep his fists from flying. Kunihiko Maeda is a simple character in Parasite Eve, serving as the science explainer in most situations. He kind of just turns up out of nowhere and does his thing, no one ever questioning why he is here and what he's actually up to. Not suspicious at all. Maeda used to work as a scientist, more specifically a postdoctoral researcher in a pharmaceutical department at a Japanese university, and after seeing the incident involving Eve in Japan, dedicated his studies to mitochondria. Maeda clearly kept his ear to the ground because the moment news broke about Carnegie Hall, he hopped straight on a plane to go find Aya and investigate. He sneaks into an evacuated New York, dodges some racist cops, and somehow manages to stumble across an unconscious Aya, the pure luck of it. Well, turns out Maeda is quite the asset. He spends the game assisting Aya and co, filling them in on the sciencey details while developing the mitochondria-laced bullets to help kill the ultimate being. Maeda is clearly of high intelligence, a theorist, and, after much thought, concludes that, and I quote, "Starting with the incident in Japan and now this, I wonder if this is a message to all mankind. If the Earth is a single human being, we humans that invade the Earth become like viruses out of control. We, in essence, are upsetting the natural balance of the body. This is definitely utter destruction. You see, humans are, in essence, parasites. You could say that we are the parasites and the world is our host." Ah, Parasite Eve. Get it? Not only is Maeda a super intelligent scientist, but he is also very shy and very polite, as seen many times in game where he struggles to get his point across or speak up. It's a real shame they decided to make him a bit of a creeper in Third Birthday, but that's a story for another time. Hans Klamp was just 17 years old when he met the Breas. He was working as an intern at St. Francis Hospital and, as discussed earlier, likely had involvement in their preceding operations. After the kidney transplant from Maya to Melissa, Klamp continued to study Maya's liver cells and would eventually culture a body of Maya. This is confirmed by Truebred Eve, which we will talk about later. His tenure at the hospital didn't last long, however, as he would eventually be caught stealing patients' medicals and HLA lists. Still, he managed to get his PhD and became a researcher at the American Museum of Natural History, where he continued his studies of genes and mitochondria. His obsession with mitochondria is seen throughout the game. At one point he says, "Parasite?" That's an interesting way of describing this most fascinating creature. We cannot live without the mitochondria. Do you understand? The mitochondria creates energy for us. Without it, we are nothing. We are here because the mitochondria allows us to be here. He clearly worships mitochondria as a higher being and will stop at nothing to help Eve achieve her goal, helping her by creating the sperm that she needed to create the ultimate being. Klamp is dedicated to the end, as seen in game by being very open about his stance on humanity and how weak and pathetic it is before finally giving his life to Eve and asking her to take him. It's never explained why he has such a hatred for the current state of humanity and even in his dying moments still thinks humans are pathetic. Hans Klamp definitely feels like an atypical villain just without the motive, which I think is a real shame. Having this unexplained hatred is a little jarring, or maybe he's a psychopath. Either way, his motives remain a mystery. In the manga version of Parasite Eve, Klamp's death is a little different, with him actually going with Eve to the final battle, then being killed by the ultimate being, which he still finds amusing. Maybe it's because it's what he wanted. Strange man. I can tell you one thing though, Hans Klamp is an absolute dick. Towards the end of the game, Eve, carried by the giant orange goop monster, takes up residence at the Statue of Liberty. No matter how hard they try, the military struggle to get close. Eventually, Aya, piloting a chopper, gets close to the goop monster, blows it up with a missile and parachutes down. Aya takes on Eve one last time and finally gets the better of her, with Eve melting into the giant orange goop. But it's not over, because they all forgot about the gestating baby which all of a sudden spawns from the orange goop on Liberty Island. The baby finds its way onto the boat and Aya picks a fight with it. The little bambino, however, is too strong. Every time Aya kills it, it comes back, stronger and stronger and stronger. For the record, while filming this, I remember how bloody horrible this fight was and died many times in the process. This damn baby can get in the bin. Meanwhile, Maeda mentions to Daniel that he has some special bullets on him containing Aya's cells, and Daniel, being the absolute hero that he is, leaps from the chopper, risking his life and spontaneously combusting, just so he can throw the bullets to Aya. What a cool little scene. Aya, now armed with the super bullets, easily takes care of business, bringing the ultimate being to its knees. But it's not over. The angry baby still has some gas left in the tank and chases Aya throughout the ship. Aya makes it to the boiler room, turns the pressure all the way up and narrowly escapes the ship before it's blown to pieces, taking out the ultimate being for good. Phew! I'd like to reiterate here how much of a pain in the ass this sequence of boss fights actually was. I'm not bitter at all. The trio of Aya, Daniel and Maeda stand on the pier looking out over the wreckage. Aya contemplates why she has powers, to which Daniel explains to Maya about her cornea transplant, which means she has a bit of Maya in her. Maeda goes on to explain that Aya's mitochondria went through a different evolutionary change to what Eve's did, still containing Eve's power, living symbiotically with the human nucleus. Although, Maeda then ends his monologue on a bit of a bum note, saying that humans are parasites living on the body that is Earth. Speak for yourself, mate. The sun comes up, and then it flashes forward in time, where Aya, Daniel, Ben and Maeda are back at Carnegie Hall to see another opera. Before the opera is about to start, it looks like Maeda is about to confess some feelings to Aya, but is cock-blocked by Ben. Little shit. Maeda is visibly pissed, and it's hilarious. The show starts, and everyone is enjoying themselves when something ominous happens. Aya's eyes glow red, and then everyone else follows suit. Aya stands up, now seemingly in control over everyone else, before the screen fades to black. This, however, is not the canon ending. For those heroic enough to play New Game Plus and make it through 76 floors of enemies in the Chrysler building, On floor 77, you get to meet the real final boss of the game and true badass, Truebred Eve. When Aya arrives, she is greeted by a small girl who bears a striking resemblance to her sister Maya. The being quickly reveals itself as the original Eve, the one inside Maya's body. Eve explained that after her organs were donated, Hans Klamp continued to culture Maya's liver cells and study the original Eve, culturing a new body, an exact replica of Maya's, just in case Melissa or the ultimate being failed. While the ultimate being was being born, the purebred Eve made its nest in the Chrysler building. Eve then lets Maya's persona come to the surface for a moment, chatting with Aya before cruelly ripping her away. It's noted here that during the car crash, Maya's body got hot, meaning she could have been the cause of the crash in the first place. Aya then fights Eve to the death in her very powerful truebred form. The fight is long, but once Aya succeeds, she can hear the voice of Eve from within her, indicating that she has finally awoken, and explains that until recently, Maya's body had been the ultimate evolutionary form of mitochondria, but now Aya's has surpassed it. Eve is then shocked to learn that there is another presence inside of her, Maya. Maya seemingly is able to subdue the Eve presence inside of Aya, and her body returns to normal, no longer in possession of powers. Aya speaks to Maya one last time and they go home together. Well, sort of inside Aya's head, but you get it. Now, you'd think that this New Game Plus ending is the canon ending, but in subsequent games, Aya does have her powers back. So does that mean the ending where she takes over the audience is canon instead? That would also seem incorrect, as neither ending seems true rolling into the second game. There's no mention of it, so what is the actual true series of events? Well, no one actually knows, but if I had to hazard a guess, it's likely the ending where Aya's powers are subdued, only for them to return sometime later. But this is just a guess. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Right, it's that time again to look at some quickfire numbers. Parasite Eve on PS1 has an average critic review of 81% on Metacritic, with one of its best reviews coming from Gaming Age, giving it 92%. The average user score comes in at 8.7, which is very good. Parasite Eve received mostly positive reviews overall, with the reviewers mainly praising the original plot, its cinematic sequences, stunning graphics, and the fact it was an RPG set in the modern world instead of a mystical fantasy land. Reviewers also mentioned at times the game felt a little slow, linear, was short for an RPG, and lacked voice acting, which would have helped with some of the more cinematic scenes. Either way, Parasite Eve became a cult classic that people will always remember, getting ranked number 16 in the top 100 PlayStation games of all time in Famitsu magazine back in 2000. According to Weekly Famitsu, during the first half of 1998, Parasite Eve had sold a whopping great 956,461 copies in Japan. While of course Resident Evil 2 had done over twice that number in the same period, close to a mil is still big numbers and would be considered a success, especially for a new franchise. On the 4th of February 2004, an official Square document would confirm that Parasite Eve had shipped over 1.94 million copies worldwide, which is pretty damn good. At time of recording, Parasite Eve has been completed on PSTV by Morningcraft TV in an incredible 2 hours, 32 minutes and 40 seconds. That's bloody quick! A link to this run, if you're interested, will be in the description. Right, that's it for the 9th episode of Deep Dives. Firstly, I'd like to give a massive shout out to my patrons for your support. You are all absolutely amazing. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. Also, big thank you to everyone for your patience in waiting for this video. I know it's taken a long time, but as you know, it's been quite the year for me and things have taken a lot longer to get out the gates. but I've been keeping the channel busy and myself busy with some short form content as well, which I hope you have also enjoyed. But even so, thank you so much for all your support over this last year. With how difficult everything's been, your kind words have kept me going, and I'll be forever grateful, so thank you so much. If you've liked what you've watched today, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button and also like this video. As always, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank everyone who's been watching deep dives, everyone that's subbed to the channel, and also a big thank you for all your support, comments and general feedback. You are all fantastic. Please keep the comments and feedback coming. What have I done right? What have I done wrong, and did I miss anything? Finally, please follow me on Twitter/X at DonPedroX for regular updates on upcoming videos. If you like what I do and fancy supporting me, I have a Patreon. I'd like to do these videos more often, so any support you can give would be amazing. Finally, always remember, do your fucking research. Right, see you next time.